Are you ready, son?
I'm ready to go.
Hello, welcome to Hard Compound, an American take on Formula One. Thank you for joining us. We've just finished watching Italy in the rain. Not terribly surprising result, but a very fun race indeed. The Tifosi showed up. Son, what's your three-word take on this race?
My three-word take is sad, rainy homecoming.
Oh,
Yeah. Like you said, the Tifosi showed up. They wanted a big weekend. And, Ferrari, after the first three races of the season, looked poised to give them a really fun, exciting weekend. And it didn't happen. The rain kind of screwed them up a little bit, a few driver mistakes, and a Red Bull that finished the race and looked really competent. So, yeah, tough weekend for Ferrari. And to have that happen in Italy is never fun for them. We'll see what happens for the rest of the season.
yeah, tough weekend for Ferrari. Very tough weekend for Carlos Sainz, other than him signing a new 2-year deal. He gets spun out by Daniel Ricciardo, I believe the only semi-Italian in Formula One right now, and doesn't even finish. So yeah, definitely tough race for them. My three-word take, a bit controversial. It is Toto isn't helping. Toto Wolff, team principal and primary owner of the Mercedes team, maybe the top boss in Formula One. I know Christian Horner and a couple others might dispute that, but certainly we can't dispute Toto Wolff's success. But it seemed as if he continues to make excuses for Lewis Hamilton, and I'm not sure that's the right tack. Lewis did not finish in the points. He had a very disappointing race. Toto continues to blame it on the car, and yet George Russell has finished in the top 5 every race this year and has almost double the points of Lewis. So we know it simply isn't the car. And so I think kind of running in front of the media and trying to protect Hamilton isn't the right tact, but we'll see. But why don't you give me some of your thoughts on this race? Because it was a fun one, I thought, despite the early rain.
I think this race was interesting. I don't think when all is said and done, it will be one of the more exciting races of the season. We got a sprint on Saturday and qualifying on Friday, which, we might talk about it a little bit later in the podcast, but I find that very enjoyable. I know there's a little bit of controversy around it, but I thought the sprint went well and led into a fun Sunday. Overall, we saw an exciting start to the race and kind of a lot of jumping around and fighting for position on a wet track, which is always fun. But as the track started to dry out, DRS wasn't enabled for a long time, and the race started to string out a little bit for me. There wasn't much happening. It wasn't very interesting for the middle part of the race. And, I think Imola is a difficult track to overtake on. We saw that in this race, but it's also very difficult to overtake when there's one dry line and the rest of the track is wet and you have zero grip. So nobody wanted to get on that wet line to try to overtake. And so we saw kind of a race where there wasn't much actually going on.
Yeah, the sprint I thought was really fun. The start of today's race I thought was really fun. But you're right, after the first several laps, they sort of settled into a pace. There wasn't much exciting happening until Charles got a little too aggressive, tried to do a little bit more than he should have. And this is something he's done in the past, more than once. And that cost him podium. I don't think he was going to get the victory. I think Max and Sergio were by then too far ahead, but that was a big mistake that I had thought Charles maybe had put behind him. He and Max, I think, have a habit of trying to push their car further than it can go, and then thinking somehow they'll will it to happen, or an opposing driver might just sort of let them have their way. but yeah, that proved pretty costly. However, on a more positive note, Haas got points in the sprint and in the race. So that was fun to see.
Yeah, Magnussen looks very comfortable in that car. He has it under control. He seems to be really enjoying his return to F1 this season. And Haas looks like it can compete with other teams, with a good Ferrari power unit and a solid, aero package design and everything like that. It seems, capable of competing with the likes of Alpine and, all other teams. So it's definitely good to see.
Yeah, Alpine continues to have reliability issues. Fernando Alonso, many years ago, obviously made a deal with the devil. Give me the most pure racing talent. And the devil did, and then snuck in a clause says, yes, but you're going to have a terrible car. And once again, he has a terrible car. So the Alpine reliability issues, McLaren still has some hiccups. Alfa Romeo with Bottas there looks solid, but I'm still not sold on Zhu. And so you're right. I think we can see Haas get points many races this year, which we have not seen in the last couple of years. So that's good. But speaking of Ferrari, speaking of Haas, Magnussen came in. He sort of got the call up like a week before the season began, it seemed. Schumacher's now been there, what? This is his second season.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not seeing him progress much. I thought he had a decent sprint. He took himself out of action this race. I think everyone's rooting for him because he seems to be such a great guy. He has the Schumacher name. There was some silly talk about, Ferrari not signing signs to a long-term deal and maybe bringing Schumacher up. I'm not sure Schumacher is ever going to be Ferrari ready.
Yeah, I'm not sold on Mick yet. It was hard to tell last season in such a dismal car against a teammate that really wasn't F1 ready in Mazepin. So, I mean, I don't think we should write off that season completely, but it's hard to take away too much from a rookie season in such a bad car. This year, with the way Magnussen is performing and the support that I think Magnussen and the Haas team overall provide Schumacher, it's been pretty disappointing these first four races. I hope that he starts to do better, but I'm like you. I really haven't seen much from him to prove that he should be brought up to the big team in Ferrari. He keeps making mistakes, whether it's, just spinning off the track alone or, getting into another car. He really hasn't seemed like he has been able to settle down in F1 yet.
We'll see. I'm rooting for him. Now, speaking of writing things off much too quickly, I think we sort of wrote off Aston Martin for this season. And then look what happens. Vettel gets points. Stroll, I think, what was he 10th or did he just miss out on the points?
He was 10th.
I don't know. Maybe it's those British cars. I mean, it was cold, rainy day, and maybe that's British cars are designed for those conditions. But so that was quite surprising, I thought, to see Aston Martin do so well after having been just so bad all season long. I believe that now means every team has points this year.
Yeah, that's good to see for starters. Obviously, the regulation changes have sort of improved the competitiveness of the sport. I think for a few years there, we saw teams go the entire season without getting a single point, multiple teams in some seasons. And that's, kind of disappointing to see. So it's really cool that all teams 4 races in have gotten points.
It is. And it's great in the driver standings and the constructor standings, because it was such a disappointing weekend for Ferrari and such a great weekend for Red Bull. Red Bull now is only 11 points behind in the constructor standings. And in the driver standings, Max really made up a lot of ground this week. Charles is at 86, Max is at 59, and then Sergio at 54, and I believe George is next at 49. That's only 4 races in, 19 races, plus at least 2 sprints more to go. So this is still wide open on both the constructor side and the driver side.
Yeah, I think we kind of expected that. We could see the pace of the Red Bulls going against Ferrari. It just happened to be reliability issues. So, like we were saying in the last few episodes, if Red Bull, irons out those reliability issues, they are going to come hard at Ferrari, and it's going to be tough for Leclerc if Sainz can't figure it out for him to fend off those Red Bulls by himself. We saw that today. I think we saw today the importance of having a strong teammate. And Sainz, he got unlucky and got spun around by Ricardo at the start of this race, but he had a pretty tough weekend overall. And I think, that really played a part in the finishing position of Leclerc.
Yeah, it did. And, we've talked about the surprising and disappointing Red Bull reliability issues with Max having two DNFs in four races. The first four races, it's just shocking. But I think more shocking is, how did Mercedes get it so wrong? They have been so dominant for so many years. And in a few of the past 7, 8 years, Mercedes dominance was so great that Lewis was, winning by half a second a lap, it seemed like. I mean, just unheard of numbers. No one else could even come close to that car certainly over the course of a season. What do you think is going on there? How did they get it so bad? Not that it's terrible. They're in third place in the constructor. George is in fourth place in the drivers, but that's not what we expect from Mercedes.
No, it's not. And I don't know. It's hard to say what is the exact cause. I think we already saw last year Red Bull starting to get closer. But, I think the cost cap might actually have a bigger effect than you might think. With teams sort of spending at least within the same realm of money as each other. And, I think Mercedes always had the upper hand, spending or having the ability to spend far more than any other team. And, it's not like other teams' engineers are necessarily dumber than anybody else, right? It's more a matter of resources. So if you close down those resources a little bit, I think the gap gets a lot closer. And then you have to start taking a look at sort of the leaders and the drivers and some of these other things to see what the real issues are.
Yeah, maybe that is it. Mercedes has spent radically more than all the other teams, then Red Bull, then Ferrari over the past many years. Maybe as this sort of spending regulations just sort of get tighter and tighter, you know, these teams at the top are just going to have to reconfigure, who has authority, who's making decisions, how fast things are getting made. Maybe that is it, because I thought after the first race, Mercedes would mostly fix their issues, certainly after second, third, and fourth race. Now, there's 2 more weeks until the next race, but it's not looking great. I'm legitimately surprised at how poor Mercedes has done. Next segment, top 10. Let's go over who we think did the top 10 this race. Why don't you start?
Okay. My top driver of the day, I think it's pretty straightforward, Max Verstappen. He was dominant all weekend. Obviously, he has a great car in that Red Bull. No reliability issues this weekend. Was extremely good in the wet, in qualifying, and in the race on Sunday. Had a tough start to his sprint race, but managed his tires, fought back, and ended up winning that. Was absolutely dominant in the Sunday race and just sort of ran away with it. Got help, certainly, from his teammate Checo to sort of fend off Leclerc and ultimately cause a little over aggressiveness from the Ferrari driver. But I mean, Verstappen was far and away the best driver on the track this entire weekend.
I agree with that. That pass he made on Charles in the sprint was so much fun to watch. And then in Sunday, despite the rain, from start to finish, he was just the best and nobody was close. And you think he's not that far behind Charles in the points. And he's had two races where he did not finish, reliability issues that Red Bull says were different. And so we assume they're fixed. But, without the reliability issues, he's one or two all four races. So he's been doing great. So I also have Max first. And then I have Checo second for sort of the reasons you laid out. He came in second in the race. He was a great teammate. I think his support of Max is probably, as you suggest, what caused Charles to sort of try to get too aggressive, which led to Leclerc spinning out and then finishing in sixth. So what about you?
I also have Checo in my 2 spot. Just a really solid performance from him, helping out Max, helping out the team, and closing that gap to Ferrari.
Yep. Now, let's see if we can keep this going. Who do you have in third?
I have Lando Norris.
So do I.
Oh, nice. Yeah, awesome drive from the young McLaren driver. Ricciardo had a tough start, but really over the whole weekend, Norris showed a little more pace than his teammate. And honestly, that McLaren looks like it's coming alive, which is really nice to see. We were a little bit disappointed with the first couple of races this season with McLaren, but Norris getting on the podium and looking good all weekend is great to see.
You're right. And I also have Norris as the third. And I do think McLaren has mostly fixed their problems. Norris probably didn't deserve to get that third spot. It was just Charles's impetuousness that sort of allowed that to happen. But hey, he took advantage of that opportunity. Ricardo made a silly error at the start, but I think we're seeing some steady improvements for McLaren. So that's fun to see. Now, who do you have in fourth?
In fourth, I have George Russell. Like we said earlier, the Mercedes car is really struggling for pace. Hamilton finished well outside the points in this race and has looked pretty poor, honestly, all season. And George Russell finishing top 5 again for the 4th race in a row in a car that obviously the Mercedes is not a horrible car. It's not the worst car on the grid. It's the 3rd best car. But I mean, consistently finishing well above Lewis Hamilton is frankly very impressive. And to sort of fend off Bottas for most of the end of that race and to make sure that he's getting really, really good points for his team, I think that's very impressive from the young Mercedes driver.
Yeah, I have Bottas in the 4th spot because he had, I thought, such a great week. And, he's in the Alfa Romeo. He's doing far better than his teammate. Once again, gets into the points. But I have then in 5th, George Russell. And for the reasons that you say, he's joined the Mercedes team this year. And let's just state facts. He's outraced Lewis Hamilton. His first season at Mercedes, he's outraced Lewis Hamilton. That is not something you can take lightly. He's finished top 5 in all 4 races. He has nearly double the points that Hamilton has. Folks can say the Mercedes car is terrible. It's not. It's in 3rd in the constructors. As I just said, Russell's finished in the top 5 all 4 races. So that's a solid car. But I do think Valtteri had a better race this weekend, driver to driver, but definitely hats off to Russell. So I have Max, Checo, Norris, Bottas, and Russell. Who do you have in your 5th spot?
I have Bottas in my 5th spot. So, yeah, I mean, I felt like it was a bit of a toss-up between these two, but the Alfa Romeo looked pretty solid all race, all weekend, really. And Bottas put in a great shift and just wasn't able to get past Russell in the closing laps. I felt like Russell's defense earned him my 4 spot, and so Bottas got 5th. But yeah, a bit of a toss up there.
Yeah, so we're mostly in agreement. So I have Max, Sergio, Lando, Valtteri, George Russell. You have Max, Sergio, Lando, George Russell, Valtteri, Bottas. So why don't you give me your 6th?
6th, I have Yuki. I thought it was a great drive from the AlphaTauri man, proving that he should stay in F1. I mean, his teammate Pierre Gasly, who we've sort of fawned over for the last year and a half, had a tough go of it today, finished outside the points, and Yuki got well up in there in seventh. I thought it was a really impressive drive from him. No mistakes, hunted down guys like Vettel and Magnussen, veterans of the sport, and passed them with ease. I thought it was a great drive from him.
Nice, nice. I have Charles in the sixth spot. Good sprint, overall decent race until sort of the near the end when he made that mistake that cost him a podium. There's a lot of pressure on him. He's the Ferrari's main driver. Let's say it. It was in the first race this season in Italy. Much was expected. Carlos got taken out on the first lap and couldn't help him. I'm sure that impacted their strategy, but overall, I thought a good race. So I have Charles in sixth, and in seventh, I then have Yuki. Yuki sort of been, not living up to our expectations this year. As you said, we fawn over Pierre Gasly, but this weekend belonged to Yuki.
Nice. Yep.
Who do you have at seven?
I'm going to break away from you a little bit here. I do not have Leclerc. I have Alex Albon. I think, we said we maybe wrote off Aston Martin a little bit too quickly this season, and you might be right, which then means the Williams is by far the worst car on the grid. Albon was close again to points in 11th place. He fought off Gasly and Hamilton the entire race in a shite Williams car. I mean, he has come back into F1 with something to prove and has outshone Latifi, his teammate, in a big way, and has put up fights against the big boys in F1. I think it's really impressive. I know he finished outside the points in this race, but I thought it was a great showing from him again.
Yeah, spoiler alert, I have Albon in 10th, but he did great. That Williams car we know is once again awful. Latifi, once again, his teammate did nothing, but Albon fought the whole way. If it hadn't been for a surprise great weekend for Aston Martin, he would have gotten points. Hats off to Christian Horner. I think he made the right choice in bringing in Sergio Perez to be Max's teammate. I think Sergio is content with being the number 2. Sergio has a great strength in being a defender, but it is remarkable that Horner, Red Bull, essentially fired both Pierre Gasly and Alex Albon. I mean, they're both great drivers. They both earn their seats in F1 every race. So just pretty amazing to me. So in 6th, you have Yuki. In 7th, you have Albon. In 6th, I have Charles Leclerc. In 7th, I have Yuki. My 8th, the forgotten man, Sebastian Vettel. I think it was just last race I said, Seb does not look happy. He certainly has nothing to prove. He's in a garbage car, the Aston Martin. Maybe he should retire, but this was a solid race for him. So I have him in 8th position. I'm going to finish mine out. In 9th, Kevin Magnussen really showed up. As we said, called up to F1 about a week before. Wasn't sure he'd ever race in F1 again. Called up about a week before the season starts. Doing great for Haas. Again, in the points at 9th. And then 10th, I have Albon. Just missed out on the points with Williams, but another impressive drive. So you're 8, 9, and 10. Who do you got?
Yeah, so we're back on track here. In 8th, I have Vettel. He showed up in the rain this weekend, back on his old team's home turf in Italy. And he had a great weekend. He was very pacey, much quicker than his teammate Lance Stroll, was putting in fights with drivers all over the track. And, he had a really solid weekend after a disappointing first race of the season for him in Australia. So I thought it was great to see him look like he was enjoying actually racing.
Yep.
And then I'm with you again in my 9 spot, Kevin Magnussen, getting more points for a Haas team that had just such a disappointing year last year. And, he's really come back into F1 with something to prove and really wants to stay here. And, the Haas, obviously not the best car on track, but, he had a great qualifying session in the wet that had kind of a disappointing sprint, but still managed to stay up there and then had a really solid race, which is good to see. And then lastly, in 10th, another guy that finished outside the points, but only just Pierre Gasly. He fought off, like Albon, he fought off Hamilton pretty much the entire race, which is no easy feat. Obviously, Hamilton hasn't quite gotten his feet under him yet this season. He hasn't looked like the 8-time world champion that he is. But I mean, it's still not an easy task to hold off a driver like that for, 40 some odd laps.
Yeah. So, wow, does that mean you did not have Charles Leclerc in your top 10 this week?
No, he screwed up big time. So I put him outside. I mean, he could have had a podium this weekend, I'll say that. And he messed up big time, and it cost him and Ferrari. So I had him outside my
Wow.
top 10.
Tough. Yeah, it wasn't a great start. And then that spin out, self inflicted wound late cost him a podium. But ouch, not even in the top 10. That's tough. So I will single out someone who I have in 20th spot. Once again, Nicholas Latifi. Every week, Albon has outraced him. The years prior, every week, essentially, George Russell outraced him. Nicholas Latifi does not look like he's one of the top 20 drivers in the world. And we've sort of accepted that because Williams has been such a poor team and Latifi is bringing some good money to the team. But this has now been years since Claire Williams sold the team. Private equity money is backing Williams. I see no reason to keep Latifi. I don't know if he is harming the team through anything other than his just bad race performance, but I think it's time for him to go. This is years of underperforming. And so I'm going to single out Nicholas Latifi.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I don't really have anybody to single out. But yeah, I mean, he has just not looked like a great F1 driver for his entire career in Formula One, consistently getting out qualified and outraced by his teammate year in and year out. And, he does bring in money, but he also costs the team a lot of money in the crashes that he has fairly frequently and never actually gets anywhere near the points. So, yeah, in my eyes, it's time for him to go. But, that's definitely a decision that Williams is going to have to make.
Let's switch to the virtual podium. So this week it was Max, Sergio, and Lando on the actual podium. Any person, group, or thing that you think belongs on the virtual podium this race?
Yeah, I thought there was a lot of fun stuff this weekend. I think Italy sort of always shows out, and we always get the tifosi, with the Ferrari love, and they're a lot of fun to sort of see with the smoke flares and the excitement about Ferrari. Obviously disappointing for them, but they showed up in a big way again. And I think they, every time we go to Italy, they deserve some love.
I wholeheartedly agree. Today's race started in the rain. It was pouring before the start of the race. They showed up. They were a raucous crowd. I love the smoke bombs. I love the flyover. I love that bouncy national anthem of theirs. Sainz got taken out on the first lap. Charles sort of screwed himself out of a podium. It was a tough week for Ferrari in Italy, but the Tifosi definitely showed up. So I definitely also have them on my virtual podium. I also, once again, wish to place the visor cam on the virtual podium. We didn't get to see much of it this week, but early on, we saw it from Ocon's perspective. And in the rain, I don't know how these guys are driving. I mean, they are going flat out, it seems. A bunch of them around a turn, 100 miles an hour. And we're seeing this from Ocon's visor cam, and it's like, I can barely see the lights. So this is just amazing what they're doing. And the visor cam is just such a great perspective.
Yeah, pretty unreal what these guys are capable of. And I mean, they seemingly have no fear. It's pretty unreal how brave they are going into some of those corners where everybody's braking you can't see them. You can't even see the turn, so you have to rely on your instincts and your sort of just, I don't know, feedback, I guess, non-visual feedback almost. It's pretty amazing what they're capable of, and you get a much better sense of that from the visor cam. So
Yep. I also want to put on the virtual podium FIA. They do a lot of things I do not like, but they have implemented the sprint and held steadfast to the sprint despite a lot of drivers, team principals, and the unhappy fans who seem to hate the sprint. I love the sprint. I love that it's now 8 points to the winner. The top 8 in the sprint get points. I loved some of the flat out racing we saw. That pass that Max made on Charles, that was awesome. Oftentimes, the coverage we see of the actual F1 race focuses, not surprisingly, on the man who's at the head. But we got a lot of midfield action, midfield views during the sprint. That was so much fun to see. I love the sprint. I disappointed in all the folks who do not love the sprint, but I wanted to make sure that FIA gets on the virtual podium for holding to the sprint format for a few weeks every year.
yeah, I think I agree with you. I think the sprint is pretty cool. In the race, we sometimes see the first sort of 10 laps or so are really exciting, lots of stuff happening. The middle of the race kind of peters out a little bit, and not a whole lot happens. And every team and driver is kind of trying to wait and see what everybody else is doing. And then the last 10 laps is kind of hectic and fun and exciting. But I think with the sprint, every lap matters so much that everybody is trying to gain positions at all times during the sprint. And, I think it creates a lot of fun battles on track. And we saw the two championship leaders in Max and Leclerc duking it out, which was fun to see. Like you said, lots of midfield battles. I'm definitely excited for the next two sprints that we get this season.
Absolutely. I'm definitely looking forward to the sprint. Let's switch real quick to the soft compound. I know we sort of have issues with some of the action, some of the words of the drivers, team principles of FIA, but on the soft compound, I want to give a shout out. I want to give a shout out to all the new fans in F1. All these years, you and I would watch the races. It was tough sometimes to find the races. They oftentimes weren't shown live. But now, here we are. There's ESPN coverage in the US, Drive to Survive. F1 TV is really improving every year. Social media is promoting F1, and it's caused just sort of an influx of new fans. And, it's easy to sort of make fun of new fans a lot of times, but I don't want to because I think it's great. I think it's great that they're helping push the sport. I think it's great that they're involved in a sport that you and I love. So I just wanted to give a shout out to the new fans in F1.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. I am always trying to get more people interested in the sport, and there's no sense in making fun of them or saying that they shouldn't care because they haven't been fans for long enough. That's always sort of ridiculous. So any new fans out there, I think it's great to see, and I hope they continue to stay fans of the sport and really get into it.
Across the line, that's where you and I make our predictions for the next race. The next race is 2 weeks in Miami. We make our predictions for who we think will finish in the top 5. Once a driver is selected, that driver is no longer available to the other person. If our driver finishes in the top 5 as we predict, that's a point for us. If our driver finishes in the exact spot that we predict, that's 3 points for us. Did I do that correct?
Correct.
Awesome. What are the current standings?
Yep. So after 3 races, I was up 17-12. This week, we both scored a disappointing 2 points.
Ouch.
Yeah. So I'm currently up after 4 races, 19-14.
Got it. Well, Let's see if I can make up some ground for Miami. I think I go first.
Mm-hmm.
I am going to choose the winner of this week's race, Max Verstappen.
Damn.
So, who do you have for first?
Yeah, Miami looks like a fast track. It's got some tight corners and some slow corners, but a couple of really long, flat out sections. And I think the Red Bulls in a straight line are much faster than anybody else. So I think they're going to do really well in Miami. So with my first two picks, I'm going to take Leclerc and then Perez.
Ooh,
Have
okay.
a bounce
Leclerc.
back for Charles.
Nice. Leclerc and Perez. Oh, that is a good one. So I will take in second, I will take Lando. And in third, I will take George, the number 2 and number 1 British drivers in F1, in my opinion. I'll leave people to figure out what I'm not saying. So, for you, in third and fourth.
That is a good question. I think I'm going to take 2 bounce back races here, and we're going to put Ricardo on the podium. We'll get a shoey in Miami, I think.
Nice.
And then for my next bounce back, we've got Carlos Sainz in fourth.
Wow. Then we don't have, shockingly, we have made 7 picks and do not yet have Lewis Hamilton on here. So my fourth, Lewis Hamilton. And I will go fifth. I will choose Valtteri Bottas,
Dang it.
his old teammate.
I wanted Bottas. That's funny. I never would have said that last year.
I know.
Ooh, that means I get to make a fun pick. You know, I am going to say we get a top 5 from the American team. I'm going to take Kevin Magnussen.
Oh, nice. That would be great. See an American team get some points in the inaugural Miami Grand Prix. So, Miami, 2 weeks from now, you have Charles Leclerc, Sergio Perez, Daniel Ricciardo, Carlos Sainz, and Kevin Magnussen. I have Max Verstappen, Lando Norris, George Russell, Lewis Hamilton, and Valtteri Bottas. Should be fun. Now, crazy prediction. Do you have any crazy predictions for Miami?
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know if I have any crazy predictions. You know, I do think Ricardo is going to get on the podium and we're going to see a shoey. I didn't pick it in across the line, but you know, why not have a crazy prediction like the American team Haas is also going to get on the podium?
Oh, that's a nice one. I love it. I don't think it will happen.
That's why it's crazy.
That's true. So, crazy prediction. I predicted Max in my cross the line segment takes the win. Let's ignore that. Crazy prediction. Miami. What is Miami? Miami's the glamour town. That's the glamour race. That's where all the new money is. That's where all the new media is. And I think 7-time world champion Lewis Hamilton, embarrassed by his performance today and eager to show up in front of all the new money, all the new media, the first race in America in 2022, Lewis Hamilton gets the victory.
Ooh, that would be something. That would be a solid sort of comeback race for Lewis this season. You know, he's been so incredible for so long, and this season, you know, we haven't seen much from him, and he's been very disappointed, I know. But yeah, that would be pretty impressive to see.
That's it, son. Good chat. Listeners, thank you for listening to the world's most beloved father and son F1 podcast. A quick reminder, send your comments and questions to hardcompoundpod@gmail.com. We'll do our best to answer them. And we are lights out.
See ya. Thanks for listening.
Awesome. Good show, son.
Yeah, it was good.
Hope you're doing well out there.
Yep. Long flight back, but was good.